You want to go all the way back. I mean, there's been, there was the yellow pages and white pages, when we were growing up, and we were using those, and those were the first data vendors ever, right? And you could say, Equifax and those other list building companies. Dun and Bradstreet, certainly some of those older companies, but they sort of come in waves. There's the Dun and Bradstreets, the Equifaxes. Then in the 2000s, there's some other companies started to come around, like the Discover Orgs and the Zoom Infos of the world. And typically, what happens is those got consolidated, right? And then you sort of saw the Wrap Leafs and the Clearbits and Full Contact and all these other API services start to come around. To be fair, data can be this kind of shadowy empire industry, and we can get into a little bit of some of those examples. I won't mention any names, but there's a lot of very interesting things that go on with data. I mean, obviously, a lot of those leaks are username password leaks or some combination of those, where they're leaking kind of that kind of sensitive information. There's lots of ways to source data, and I would say there's a lot of companies that trade data. There's a lot of these like data unions that people operate. Sometimes they're legal, sometimes they're not. And that's just kind of the truth of it. Some of them is just like, hey, I'm gonna trade you all these IP addresses tied to emails. Sometimes they're passing MAIDs, which are mobile device IDs tied to other IP addresses, and so basically it's just one huge identity resolution job where all of these data companies are sharing data and trying to figure out who has what data to fill in the gaps that they don't have. Right. That's sort of the data industry in a nutshell. A lot of different players are using each other's data. But in terms of the shadowy data that you're mentioning, like, those like huge Facebook leaks and all those, there are some people that use that data. There's very few people that I know that are public about using that data, or even show it in their applications because of privacy implications. But you can get public data from all those different sources. It's a bit shadowy, though. It is. I mean, I think even in your world, maybe I would imagine that there's a lot of companies whose underlying data sets have come from some shadowy places. I do remember those times too, where people are talking about like petabytes of data. Like, how many flops and Google flops of data do you have? You can't just like throw garbage in there and be like, I have a petabyte of just like complete garbage. I think if it's relevant data, it certainly can be made more useful now than ever before. So just like you mentioned, there are several tools that exist that have done data enrichment. They've existed for a long time. Yeah, so typically how that used to work was, you have your data in an Excel spreadsheet or something, and then you would go to ZoomInfo or Clearbit, you'd upload your CSV, your spreadsheet, and then they'd basically fill out all the information, append all the new information, tell you if it's verified or not, and then you would use that, plug that into whatever back into your CRM or whatever. Now, to give you an example, if you're doing construction, you might get business insurance that says, like, if you say, hey, I do plumbing and I only work on ranches, like I'm never doing roofs, right? I'm never on a roof, so like I don't need that level of insurance, right? But then on your like Instagram is like a picture of you like on a roof, like drinking a beer, right? So like now that company might want that Instagram data of your business to be like, is there any pictures of anyone on a roof, right? And that could tell them information that they would then sell to these insurance companies and say, hey, maybe you should be careful about this, or the level of risk might be higher than you think it is, right? So we're still in the Wild West of figuring out how to even harness customer data and like secure it in any sensible way. It does depend on your jurisdiction. I think things are sort of converging towards some of the laws that the GDPR and CCPA implemented. So with GDPR, there's basically a rule around legitimate interest. I think the only reason why that law got passed because there was this giant fucking loophole in it. That was just like, yeah, like we're going to protect everyone's privacy unless we want to sell them something. And then I think CCPA is trying to do the same. But one thing that the U.S. laws are a lot more lax about is sort of like someone's direct personal email, whereas in Europe they're very much not that. You cannot reach out to people's personal emails for any reason, work related or otherwise. As far as I understand. What would the barcode on your back lead me to? What would I be buying if I scanned the barcode on your back?